Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about a new release from the White Peak Distillery down in Derbyshire, the Wireworks brand of single malt whiskies, and this is their latest batch, which is called Alter Ego. Now, there's reasoning behind all the different names of the Wireworks bottlings, and what I'm going to do on this video is compare Alter Ego to what is considered now their core bottling that used to be the small batch, and this is Kaduro. So we are going to have a comparison with this Kaduro. Now Kaduro, Wireworks is so called because it's in an old wire factory, and Kaduro was the name of a brand of wire that was made at that factory many years ago. The reason that this is called Alter Ego is that while they were doing their early runs of distillation, Alter Ego, for a brief period, I think it was about a month, way back in the early days, they were taking the cuts at a different point along the distillation run. And I'll go into that in a minute because it needs a little bit of explanation. But what it means is that there is a slight difference in terms of the flavour profile, the overall character of this compared to this. Hence, this is a Wireworks Alter Ego. But before I give you the explanation and try and somehow describe what is going on to differentiate this to this, let me give you some background information about the distillery, Max and Claire who set it up, everything that goes on, and then we'll look at the whiskey itself.
The White Peak Distillery is based in Ambergate, Derbyshire, 12 miles north of Derby city centre. It was founded by Max and Claire Vaughan in 2016, who were following a dream for years of producing a single malt whisky in Derbyshire, despite no previous experience in the drinks industry. The distillery is sited in a 24-kilometre stretch of the Derwent Valley that was awarded UNESCO World Heritage status in 2001, within the old maintenance and store sheds of the Johnson and Nephew Wireworks that date back to 1876 and lasted for 120 years, which itself was rebuilt from a family-owned iron forge from the early 1800s. Initial spirit releases from White Peak included a range of gins and an agricole rum aged in ex-Bourbon barrels, with their first single malt whisky release initially scheduled for launch in November in 2021. However, supply issues with the distinctive bottle that pays homage to the wire and cable produced by the old factory meant the first release was delayed to February 2022. The team employ a longer than average fermentation period and use 2 copper pot stills of 3,000 and 2,100 litres in volume. Water is sourced from the River Derwent immediately adjacent to the distillery, utilising some of the old pumping infrastructure for their condenser cooling system. Only English barley is used, and when I visited a couple of days before the launch of their first release, the team had begun a run of spirit that was using barley taken purely from Derbyshire itself. Alter Ego is so named because in the very early days of production after the distillery was founded, Cutpoints during the distillation run were changed for a few months as an experiment to see what the effect would be on the new make spirit. A higher proportion of ex-Bourbon as opposed to STR cask was also used for marrying the final batch in order to accentuate the increased fruity and smoky notes that had appeared in that new make spirit as a result. White Peak Alter Ego is released as a batch of 5,393 bottles, available worldwide at an ABV of 51.5%.
Okay, so Alter Ego. And in terms of this different points of the cut in distillation. Now, if you're watching this, you're probably a bit of a whiskey nerd, you're probably into your spirits, you may well be aware of what is going on through the distillation process, all the technicalities of it and blah, 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 blah. But if you're not, you might be going, well, what does that mean? Different cut points in the distillation run. So in essence, you have your wash in a still, and this is what you're going to do for your run of either the wash still or the spirit still, is as you start to bring it up to a boiling temperature, within that wash, different parts of that wash will evaporate at different temperatures. So you get, it's not just consistent, everything evaporates, it turns into steam, it goes up, and then you condense it, and that's what makes whiskey, or at least a new make spirit. There are different parts of what's in the bottom of the still that are evaporating and vaporizing and coming up, and they have different characteristics to them. And what you want to do is you want to take, ideally, the best parts of that entire run. You don't necessarily want the ones at the start. The starts have got, now, it used to be that it was like, oh, it's pure methanol, that's what makes you blind. There are nasty bits in the start of that run The four shots, they're known as, where basically you don't really want them because it doesn't really taste particularly nice and it's not healthy for you. The middle bit is where all the flavor are and all the character is and everything like that. And then at the end, that's when you're starting to get like things are running down and you're getting bits and pieces that you don't really want in there. And again, it doesn't taste particularly good. So you've got this middle section of the entire distillation run, and that's what you want to do. So basically there's this little arm that comes off as it condenses down on the condenser, and it will be pouring into wherever you're storing your spirit. But what you'll do is you'll have it in a runoff to get the bits at the start that you don't want. Then you'll flick the arm across. That's the bit that you want to collect. And then the arm goes back to get all the, in essence, dregs at the end of it that you don't want in that batch of new make spirit. But depending on when you swing that arm across can depend quite a lot on what your end result flavor profile is going to be. If you take it earlier, you end up getting kind of heavier feeling textures and flavors. If you move that towards the end, now I was actually going to get a stick or something like that to try and do that, and now I can't find anything because the best way I can describe it, I'm not going to use that because that's my Hoover. The best way I can describe it is by using a line, and I could put something on top of the screen. Let's use this bit of broom. Why not? Let's get really technical. Okay, so come on down. Right. This is going to get really technical and really fancy. Right, so let's give this a go. So ignore that bit on the end. That's got nothing to do with distillation. So if I try and do that, so we do the entire screen, right? Well, no, do that. Right, so here we have, and I'm going to do it this way. So this might look really confusing because if I do that as the start, is that going to look like the start? I don't know. I'm working here. Right, so you start here, bomb. Get everything up to temperature. Vapors start running off, right? You don't really want this bit at the front, because there's unhealthy bits in it. It doesn't taste very nice. It's really funky. No thanks. We don't want that bit in it. So what we'll do is we'll let it run for a bit, and then we'll swing our arm across and we'll take that bit. From there, this is now running off into our tank or wherever we're keeping it in, that we're storing it in until we move it into a barrel. So then it runs and runs and runs, and then it changes, and then we get different things evaporating and different flavors coming through. And then towards the end, you don't really want that bit either. So you go, right, run, flick that switch across, move that arm across. We don't want those bits, and those go into a runoff that you might then throw into the next wash. So you've got this middle section here. That's the bit that you're using. I'm trying to keep my arms straight. That's the bit that you're using for your new make spirit to then go into barrels and everything like that. It might only be that. It probably isn't, because that's not particularly cost effective, but it might be that. Now, you might actually want to start earlier and finish earlier as well. You might want to take even more. You might want to take less. You might want actually that you want to go further towards this lighter side towards the end. And that will give you different flavor profiles just in your new make spirit before you even put them into any kind of barrel. So what's happened here is, in order to maintain consistency, a new distillery will eventually, through experimentation and playing around with different cut points, go, this is what we want. This is what we want as our new make spirit, to then go into various different casks and everything. But we have this consistent base that we're doing, and we will always do that. And for some distilleries, it is literally a stopwatch, and they go at a particular time, the arm goes across, and then a particular time, the arm goes back. For some, it's as it's running off, they'll look at the ABV, and then they'll do it at that. Other times we'll do it at just literally a sense check. Some places even do it based on smell, if it's like an old school distillery. There's all sorts of things, but then all of a sudden you are doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So with the alter ego, this was an experiment with slightly different cut points that might be earlier, might be later. I don't actually know where those cut points are compared to what they do for their standard distillation runs, but it is in turn giving them a different flavor profile to what the Kadura is. So the best way of seeing how that works is to do it side by side with the Kadura. So let me first give you an indication of what the alter ego just on its own tastes like. Now, there is also more emphasis on bourbon casks as opposed to the STR red wine casks. And my feeling is because they would have tasted the spirit and gone, oh, actually, this is a bit more fruitier. Let's highlight that. Let's go a little bit more for that vanilla route, the slightly sweeter route, to highlight what we have within that new make spirit with the new cut points. So on the nose, lovely and fresh and fruity. There's a touch of that smokiness coming through. but I'm getting overwhelming kind of like red berries straight off the bat. But like red currants, light red berries, not so much cherries, although there is a little bit of like red cherry in there. But I've got red currants, raspberries in particular. Really fresh. There's a hint of smoke underneath, but it's quite subtle. Really summery, a really summery nose this. Right, on the palate. Oh, absolutely follows through. Proper summer pudding vibes going on here. Lovely creaminess underneath. Very much a hint of kind of, very summer pudding. I'm getting a real kind of, that soaked bread that you get kind of on the outside of a summer pudding when it's kind of like in a bowl, bowl's tipped upside down, and you get that really fruity, juicy bread. Lovely juiciness, but then that smoke element, that low, the best way I can describe Wireworks smokiness is like a low rolling smoke that's close to the floor. It's just what pops up in my head when I try and describe and also sense the smokiness that's in here. It's very deep. It's a deep smokiness that's not overwhelming. It's in the background and it's there and it's just kind of rolling through, but not dominating, not coming up to the fore. It's incredibly fruity. And again, red fruits all the way through. We start to feel a bit more of like marasca cherries rather than those red currants and raspberries coming through that are still there. We're getting hints of blackcurrant, all of that thing. Again, it feels, considering how deep the whiskey is and considering there's that smokiness in there, it feels quite a summery whiskey. Now, I think it helps when I'm actually videoing this. It's an absolutely glorious week out there. And the sun is shining and there's not a cloud in the sky and it's kind of ridiculously hot. But this still works really, really well. But I think it would still work in autumn, winter because of that deep kind of richness that's throughout that whiskey. Now, I think it's fantastic, but let's see how it compares to the Kuduro. Are we going to see a difference between the two? Or is this kind of one of those, well, we've done something slightly differently, but unless you try it side by side, you won't actually kind of know the difference, but it means you can get away with selling some bottles. Which unfortunately, some places do. Oh, we've done things very differently. And when you actually try it side by side with their standard bottling, it's the same thing. They've just called it a different name and put it in fancy packaging. So, Kuduro, Alter Ego. Let's go for the Kuduro first. Interesting. Straight away, I get more berry note on the Alter Ego than I do on the Kuduro. The Kuduro feels lighter, a little bit more restrained. The smokiness isn't as prevalent. It actually suffers because of the more intense fruitiness that's on the Alter Ego. Right, palate-wise, let's do Kuduro first. We also have a slightly higher alcohol percentage as well. So the Kuduro, 46.8, the Alter Ego, 51.5. Fruit is on there, very much so. Slightly sweeter, slightly more vanillin, almost like red fruits coated in a little kind of crust of brown sugar. The smokiness is there, but a bit more restrained, not as intense. On the Alter Ego, there's more of a, almost like a cream soda feel. The vanilla element that's there, but thereabouts, it's kind of a bit more in the background, is much more upfront on here. Now, I suspect that is also a combination of the cut points of the distillation run, but also that increased use of the bourbon casks as well. Very much kind of like a raspberry cream soda feel going on here with that smokiness in the background that is there. I think that smokiness is a little bit more intense, but also just, what are we looking at? 5% ABV extra does give you a little bit more heat, but is still really well balanced, but actually makes this more pronounced. And the Kuduro becomes much more restrained, much lighter, actually suffers a little bit. I'd be really interested to try the two of these side by side at the same ABV. Either bring the Kuduro up to 51.5 or bring the Alter Ego down to 46.5. 46.5? 46.8. 46.8. and see what they are like at the same ABV, because the ABV is definitely making a difference here. And I think the Kuduro kind of suffers side by side because of it. I don't think it's just the ABV, but I think a more fair representation would be to have the two side by side with the same ABV. And I don't think I can potentially get water in here to the level where it's going to be the same. There is a difference between the two, absolutely. The Alter Ego definitely has more of a fruity note in there, slightly sweeter as well. I think it's arguably a bit more approachable. But the Kuduro as a house style, as a representation of what Wireworks and White Peak can achieve, it's still absolutely brilliant. I think this gives you a slightly different, almost like it was an alter ego of the Kuduro. Is one better than the other? I actually prefer the Alter Ego. I think given the choice, I'd go for the Alter Ego. And I think it's got more going for it, but I do wonder how much of that is that additional ABV, that extra 5% or so. I think it's got more intensity, but I do wonder if you added water to this, whether it would actually be a slightly fruity version of Kuduro, and the two would be interchangeable in terms of one is not better than the other. Now, there is a £5 difference, but that would account for the extra ABV because you have higher duty. Higher the ABV is, you have to pay more duty. So whereas the Kuduro is $59.99, the Alter Ego is $64.99. And I actually think there is scope for both on your shelf. Both are fantastic. You're probably aware if you've seen my previous videos, I am a big fan of what White Peak have been doing. When I get the whole whiskey in my mouth and not dribble it down the side, I think they're consistently brilliant all the way through. That Kuduro, that final mouthful, was absolutely gorgeous. Fruit, soft smoke, complex, finish goes on for ages. Alter Ego, bit more fruit, bit more smoke, but more ABV. More of a bite on the mouth, more of that kind of like lingering sense. It does lengthen the finish because you have more of that kind of prickling sensation of the higher alcohol. I actually now want to see Kuduro at 51.5. I think Alter Ego is almost doing Kuduro a disservice by just having that little bit extra. They're both great. They're both brilliant. Now, Alter Ego is not a limited edition as such. There are more bottles than some of the other releases that they've done, like Double Oak Port and things like that. But it probably will disappear at some point. And it is a fantastic whiskey. So I would highly recommend getting 2 bottles if you were wanting to keep one as some kind of investment-y type thing. But yeah, it's great. It's absolutely brilliant. Again, they are just consistently a brilliant distillery. And it's really, really interesting to try the two side by side. So if you do want to see what it's like, I do have some of this, because this was the sample bottle kindly given to me by the distillery, in order for me to do this, and also give customers who come into the shop a chance to try it to see what they think of it. That is me done. I shall see you at the next video. Oh, if you want to purchase a bottle, because as you can see, I've got stock of it still, head to www.spiritspecialist.com, where you can buy. I've got UK nationwide delivery, so if you live anywhere in the UK, I can send it to you. If you don't live anywhere in the UK, unfortunately, I can't, but I am working on that. So if you're outside of the UK, see if you can find some way of getting it, or if you've got a friend that you're going to be seeing, or you're coming to the UK, or anything like that, we'll figure something out. But that's me done. I shall see you at the next video. Cheers.